The helicopter rotors pulsed against my eardrums as we dropped toward the oil rig. The Gulf stretched flat and gray to the horizon, broken only by the metal island growing larger beneath us. I'd done this landing 26 times on different rigs, but number 27 looked identical from 200 feet up. Same helipad markings, same scattered equipment, same orange life rafts hanging off the sides. The skids touched down with a familiar jolt. I ducked under the slowing blades, grabbed my duffel, and followed the landing officer toward the central structure. Standard procedure. The vibration of machinery traveled through my boots, a constant tremor I'd long ago learned to filter out like background noise. Inside the main module, the air carried the expected smells: machine oil, industrial cleaner, coffee gone bitter on a warmer. A tall man with salt and pepper hair stood by a desk, checking something on a clipboard. He looked up as the door closed behind me. "Martinez?" He extended a weathered hand. "John Harrison, shift supervisor." His grip was firm, calloused, the handshake of someone who'd done real work before moving to management. "David Martinez, good to be aboard." I set my bag down by my feet. "When do we start the safety orientation?" Harrison studied me for a moment, then reached into his desk drawer. "Got your basic certifications from your file. Pressure monitoring, emergency protocols, evac procedures. You've been doing this, 8 years? 9 in October." He nodded, pulled out a laminated card about the size of a playing card and held it between 2 fingers. "This rig has some specific guidelines beyond the standard safety protocols." I took the card. The lamination was scratched, the corners rounded from handling. 4 lines of text were printed in black against a yellow background. 1. Do not acknowledge or speak to the old man. 2. Stay away from water after 11 p.m. 3. Never enter the 3rd floor bathroom. 4. If you see red lights on the water, report it immediately. I waited for the punchline. Harrison's face remained serious. "This some kind of tradition? Mess with the new guy?" I kept my tone light, respectful. Harrison didn't smile. "Everyone gets the same card on day 1. Keep it with you." He tapped the laminate with his index finger. "This isn't corporate bullshit or hazing. These rules keep people alive. I'd encountered plenty of rig superstitions before. Don't whistle during night shifts. Never say the word drown. Always enter the mess hall right foot first. Every crew had their quirks." "Sure thing," I said, slipping the card into my breast pocket. "I'll play along." "This isn't a game, Martinez." Harrison's voice dropped lower. "You don't have to believe it yet. Just follow the rules." Something in his tone made me straighten my posture. "Yes, sir." He seemed satisfied with that response. "Good. Campbell will show you to your quarters. You're on night shift starting today, 2200 hours. A stocky man with a well-trimmed beard appeared in the doorway. "I'm Tony," he said with a quick nod. "Got your bunk ready." I shouldered my bag and followed him through a series of narrow corridors. The layout was standard. Central work areas surrounded by living quarters, equipment storage, and mess hall. "So what's with the card?" I asked as we walked. Harrison seemed pretty serious about it. Tony glanced over his shoulder. "You'll understand soon enough. Just stick to those rules and you'll be fine." "The old man one is weird. Who exactly am I not supposed to talk to?" Tony stopped at a door marked B7. "If you see him, you'll know. Here's your bunk. Bottom one's yours." He pushed the door open to reveal a small room with 2 beds stacked against the wall, 2 lockers, and a tiny shared desk. Bathrooms 3 doors down on the right. Mess hall opens at 6, 1400, and 2100. I tossed my bag onto the lower bunk. "How long have you been on this rig?" 4 years, 2 months. He leaned against the doorframe. "Longest anyone stayed in the last decade." "Why's that?" "High turnover." Tony shrugged. "Some people can't handle it." "Handle what exactly?" He checked his watch. get settled in. Shift starts in 3 hours. Don't be late." He tapped the wall twice with his knuckles and left. I unpacked methodically, arranging my clothes in the locker and setting my toiletries in a small caddy. The ritual was familiar, comforting. 9 years of moving between temporary homes had taught me efficiency. The small photo of my sister and her kids went on the shelf above the bunk. Work clothes hung in the locker. 5 pairs of socks rolled and stacked. 2 paperbacks tucked under the pillow. The strange rule card sat on my mattress. I picked it up, reading it again. Do not acknowledge or speak to the old man. Who would that even be? Most rig workers were under 50. The physical demands of the job tended to push people toward early retirement. Stay away from water after 11 p.m. That one almost made sense. Night shifts and open water were a dangerous combination, though the safety railings and protocols made accidents rare. Never enter the 3rd floor bathroom, probably out of order or under repair. If you see red lights on the water, report it immediately. That could be legitimate. Maybe signals from boats or other rigs. I tucked the card into my pocket and headed to the mess hall. Best to get some food before my first shift. As I walked the metal pathways, I studied the rig's layout. The central derrick rose against the darkening sky, and walkways spread outward like spokes. Workers moved with practiced efficiency, checking gauges, tightening fittings, logging numbers on clipboards. Normal, routine. Just like every other rig I'd worked. I filled a tray with meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans that had been cooked long enough to lose both color and texture. The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly as expected. I sat alone, watching the other workers. They talked and laughed like any crew, sharing jokes and complaining about schedules. After eating, I returned to my quarters to change into work clothes. The coveralls were fresh from the laundry, still holding creases. I laced my steel-toed boots tight and double-checked my pockets for the essentials. Multi-tool, small flashlight, notebook, pen. My fingers brushed against the laminated card. I pulled it out, staring at the rules one more time before sliding it back into my pocket. Harrison's warning echoed in my head, but I dismissed it. Every workplace had its quirks and traditions. This was just another one. I stepped out onto the deck as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The night shift was beginning and the floodlights snapped on, casting harsh white light across the metal structures. The ocean stretched dark and endless around us, swallowing the light at the edges of the rig. The card pressed against my chest through the fabric of my pocket as I walked toward my station. Just veteran workers messing with the new guy. Nothing more. The pressure gauges on the secondary pump system needed checking every 4 hours. Nobody had told me why, just that it was procedure. 3 hours into the midnight shift, I made my way across the metal walkway toward the east side of the platform. My boots made hollow sounds against the grating, competing with the constant low rumble of machinery and the distant wash of waves against the rig's supports. The night air hung thick with salt and diesel. Floodlights created pools of harsh white illumination, surrounded by deeper shadows. I clicked my flashlight on, sweeping it across the gauges mounted on a panel near the equipment storage area. The beam caught something in the periphery. A movement in the darkness beyond the storage containers. I steadied the light. A man stood there, partially hidden by shadow. Something seemed off about his posture. Too still, like he was waiting. Probably another worker checking inventory, I figured. "Evening," I called out, moving the beam away to avoid blinding him. "You need access to the pressure panel?" The figure's head rotated toward me, not turned, rotated. The movement had a mechanical wrongness to it, too quick and fluid for neck muscles. My flashlight beam found his face. His skin resembled old leather left too long in the sun, creased with hundreds of deep wrinkles. The eyes registered first, not eyes at all, but black hollows that absorbed light. His mouth stretched open, wider than a human mouth should be able to, revealing rows of yellowed teeth. He wore clothes I'd only seen in old photographs, high-waisted trousers with suspenders, a collarless shirt with the sleeves rolled precisely to the elbow. The garments looked decades out of place, yet unnaturally crisp. I took an instinctive step backward. "Sorry, I didn't." The figure surged forward with impossible speed, one moment at the edge of the light, the next closing the distance between us with a fluid grace that defied his ancient appearance. His hand, fingers too long, nails curved to points, reached for my face. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. It clattered across the metal grating, rolling to a stop with the beam pointing uselessly toward the sky. The old man's nails scraped against a support beam as I ducked under his arm. The sound cut through the night, like knives dragging across metal. I ran. The walkway swayed slightly beneath my pounding footsteps. Behind me came a rasping noise, a rhythm that mimicked breathing, but lacked the wetness of human lungs. The sound maintained a consistent distance no matter how fast I moved. My boot caught on an uneven section of grating. I pitched forward, catching myself against the railing. Cold metal bit into my palms. The rasping grew louder, closer. I pushed off the rail and sprinted the final stretch toward the main platform, where the drilling controls hummed with activity. Tony stood at the monitoring station, adjusting something on the control panel. The fluorescent lights above cast his face in a sickly blue-white glow. I slowed to a stop beside him, pressing a hand against my ribs where a stitch pulled tight. "You okay, Martinez?" Tony's eyes narrowed as he looked past me to the walkway I'd just traversed. I turned to look. The walkway stretched empty in both directions, illuminated by the regularly spaced lights along its length. No sign of the old man, no movement in the shadows. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. Someone was out there. Tony's expression shifted from concern to grim understanding. Tall, dressed old-fashioned, black eyes. I nodded, still catching my breath. "You spoke to him?" "Not a question." "I thought he was a worker." My heart rate began to slow. I wiped sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. What the hell was that? Tony glanced at the other workers nearby, then lowered his voice. "First rule on the card, Martinez. Don't acknowledge the old man." I pulled the laminated card from my pocket, reading the first rule again. The plastic felt cool against my fingertips. "What happens if you talk to him?" I asked. "He notices you." Tony's gaze drifted back to the empty walkway. "And once he notices you, he doesn't forget. You're on his list now." "His list for what?" Tony turned back to the control panel, adjusting a dial with practiced precision. "You don't want to find out. Some workers have. They don't work here anymore." He logged a reading in the monitoring book. "Stay in lit areas for the rest of your shift. Don't go anywhere alone until sunrise." I nodded, the weight of the rule suddenly concrete. Not superstition, not tradition, a survival tactic. "We've got a pressure check due on the east side," I said, remembering my interrupted task. "I'll send Miller with you after he finishes the tank inspection." Tony made another adjustment to the controls. "Buddy's system applies now, especially for you." I leaned against the railing, looking out at the dark water surrounding our metal island. The ocean stretched black and unknowable in all directions. 3 hours into my first night shift, and I'd already broken rule number 1. The laminated card felt heavier in my pocket, its warnings no longer cryptic superstition, but a manual for survival. I wondered about the other 3 rules and what happened to those who broke them. The night stretched ahead, 7 more hours until sunrise. I stayed under the bright lights of the main platform and tried not to look for movement in the shadows. I woke at 1300 hours to the sound of someone shuffling gear in a locker. My roommate, Sanders, according to the name tag on his coveralls, nodded at me before heading out. The room felt stuffy, smelling of industrial soap and male sweat. I sat on the edge of my bunk, examining the 3 long scratches on my wrist where my watch had chafed during sleep. The laminated card rested on my small shelf beside the bunk. I'd seen the old man, spoken to him, and understood the danger. Tony's warning about being on his list lingered in my thoughts. I showered in the communal bathroom 2 doors down, standing under water hot enough to redden my skin. The facilities were standard rig issue, stainless steel fixtures, anti-slip flooring, dispensers bolted to tiled walls. Nothing supernatural here, just the mundane rituals of offshore life. After dressing in fresh work pants and a company t-shirt, I checked my schedule. My next shift started at 2200 hours, giving me nearly 8 hours of downtime. Usually I'd spend it reading or sleeping, but the remaining rules on the card nagged at me. The 3rd floor bathroom. Red lights on water. After 11 water warnings. I grabbed a protein bar from my locker and headed to the mess hall. The corridor hummed with the rig's constant mechanical pulse, generators, pumps, ventilation systems. 2 workers passed me, deep in conversation about pressure differentials, normal rig talk. The mess hall sat half empty. A few day shift workers huddled around coffee mugs before their afternoon duties. I filled a mug with coffee that smelled stronger than it tasted and took a seat alone. From my pocket, I pulled out the laminated card again. Rule 3. Never enter the 3rd floor bathroom. Why that specific bathroom? What made it different from the 2nd floor facilities or the showers near my quarters? Logic suggested the other rules existed for equally valid reasons, but curiosity pulled at me like an undertow. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and left it on the drying rack. The clock above the mess hall door read 14:20. Plenty of time to explore. The central stairwell connected all 4 levels of the rig's living quarters. I climbed past the 2nd floor, my boots echoing against metal treads. The 3rd floor landing opened to a corridor similar to my own level, narrow, utilitarian, lined with numbered doors. The bathroom should be easy to find. They followed standard layouts on these rigs, centered between living quarters for easy access. I walked slowly, noting that this floor seemed quieter than the others. No voices behind doors, no equipment being moved. Halfway down the corridor, I found it. A metal sign with bathroom stenciled in white paint hung slightly crooked on the wall beside the door. Unlike the bathroom on my floor, this door stood partially open, a wedge of darkness visible in the gap. I stopped 5 feet away, listening. Water dripped somewhere inside, a steady rhythm of drops hitting metal. The sound carried in the empty hallway. I reached for my flashlight out of habit, then realized I'd left it in my locker. The corridor lights cast enough illumination to see by at least. "Hello?" I called, keeping my voice low. "Anyone in there?" No response, just the steady drip, drip, drip. My hand found the laminated card in my pocket. Rule 3. Never enter. But I needed to understand why. 9 years on rigs had taught me that knowing the reason behind safety protocols made them easier to follow. If this bathroom was structurally unsound or had exposed electrical wiring, I wanted to see it for myself. I pushed the door wider. Hinges protested with a low whine. The smell hit me first. Mildew and something sharper like copper and ammonia mixed together. My eyes adjusted to the dimmer light inside. The bathroom had been standard issue once. 4 sinks along one wall, toilet stalls opposite, shower stalls at the far end. Now rust bloomed across the white tiles in reddish-brown patterns resembling continents on a map. Water pooled on the floor where it dripped from a cracked pipe above the sinks. The mirrors had been removed, leaving rectangular outlines of cleaner tile. I stepped inside, careful to avoid the puddles. My boot heels clicked against the tile. The sound echoed strangely, as if the room were larger than its dimensions suggested. Something moved in the far corner by the shower stalls. I squinted into the shadows. A figure crouched there, hunched and still. A man in what looked like work coveralls similar to mine, though torn and stained with dark patches. "Hey," I said. "You okay there?" The figure's head snapped up, not turned, snapped, like a rubber band released from tension. He stared at me with eyes too wide, too white against his dirt-streaked face. His breathing came fast and shallow, visible in the rapid rise and fall of his chest. Need some help? I took another step forward, hand extended palm up in a calming gesture. I can get the medic if... The man's mouth opened in a silent scream, lips peeling back from teeth that looked sharp. Wrong. He lunged forward with a sudden jerking motion, covering the 15 feet between us faster than seemed possible. I backpedaled, but his hand shot out, fingers ending in curved, blackened nails. They raked across my left forearm, tearing through my shirt sleeve and into skin. Pain flared hot and immediate. I shoved him away with my right arm, connecting with a chest that felt too light, insubstantial. He stumbled backward but remained upright, head tilted at an unnatural angle. I bolted for the door, blood already soaking my sleeve. Behind me came a sound, not footsteps, but a scraping noise like nails dragging across tile. The man screamed then, a high, broken sound that contained no words, only rage. I slammed the bathroom door shut behind me and ran down the corridor toward the stairs. Blood dripped from my fingertips, leaving a trail of dark spots on the metal floor. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat. 2 flights down, I pushed through the door marked medical into a small room with cabinets of supplies and an examination table. No medic present. They only staffed during day shifts unless called for emergencies. I grabbed gauze pads from an open cabinet and pressed them against my forearm. Blood soaked through immediately, bright red against the white material. The scratches ran from wrist to elbow, 3 parallel lines deep enough to need more than simple bandaging. The sink provided cold water to rinse the wounds. I hissed through clenched teeth as water hit raw flesh. The scratches looked clean-edged, like cuts from a sharp blade rather than human nails. God damn it, Martinez. I turned to find John Harrison standing in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. His expression mixed anger with resignation. Third rule. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. You broke the third rule. There was someone in there, I said, reaching for more gauze. He attacked me. John opened a cabinet and removed a first aid kit, setting it on the counter beside me. Not someone, something. He pulled out antiseptic, fresh gauze, and medical tape. Give me your arm. I extended my bleeding forearm. John worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wounds with antiseptic that burned worse than the initial cuts. What was it? I asked as he began wrapping gauze around my arm. The bathroom ghost. John secured the bandage with medical tape. Used to be a worker named Ellis. Had a breakdown about 15 years ago before my time. Locked himself in that bathroom for 3 days. When they finally broke down the door, he'd carved himself up with his own tools. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. He died in there? Bled out before the medevac arrived. John checked his handiwork, then began repacking the first aid kit. Started appearing about a week after they cleaned the place up. First guy who saw him thought he was just another worker. Got too close. He nodded toward my bandaged arm. Lost 3 fingers. Jesus. I flexed my hand, feeling the pull of torn skin beneath the bandages. We tried sealing the bathroom, boarding it up. Didn't work. Door always ends up open again. John closed the kit with a decisive click. So we made Rule 3. Stay out of the 3rd floor bathroom. And the ghost can't leave? I asked. Territorial. Confined to that space. John's eyes met mine, serious and direct. Unlike the old man, who you've also managed to attract. I leaned against the examination table, suddenly aware of how quickly my heart was still beating. I thought the rules were bullshit, hazing the new guy. I know. John didn't sound angry anymore, just tired. Everyone does at first. That's why we lose people. They don't believe until it's too late. Tony said I'm on the old man's list now. I looked down at my bandaged arm. What about the bathroom ghost? You're safe as long as you stay away from the 3rd floor. He can't leave his territory. John crossed to the sink and washed his hands thoroughly, methodically. But the old man... He let the sentence hang unfinished. What do I do about him? John dried his hands on a paper towel. Stay in groups, keep to lit areas after dark. And next time, Martinez... He fixed me with a hard stare. Follow the damn rules. I nodded, feeling the weight of the laminated card in my pocket like a stone. We've still got 2 more rules you haven't broken. John's voice held no humor. Let's keep it that way. The night shift control room hummed with the steady rhythm of machinery. Monitors displayed pressure readings, temperature gauges, and drilling progress in neat, organized rows. Tony and I sat at the main console, recording numbers in the operations log every 30 minutes. My bandaged arm throbbed beneath my sleeve, a constant reminder of Rule 3. I checked my watch. 11:25. We'd been on shift for nearly an hour and a half. How's the arm? Tony asked, not looking up from the monitoring station. Hurts. I rotated my wrist, feeling the pull of torn skin. John says I got off easy. Tony nodded, making a notation in the logbook. Ellis took 3 fingers off Ramirez back in 2018. Guy transferred out the next day. He tapped his pen against the metal desk. You thinking about transferring? I hadn't decided yet. After 9 years on rigs, I'd seen accidents, crushed limbs, burns, falls, but nothing like this. Nothing that defied explanation. Still weighing my options, I said. The radio crackled. Rodriguez from the drilling floor reported normal operations, routine check-in. Tony acknowledged and returned to monitoring the pressure gauges. My gaze drifted to the windows. Beyond the floodlights illuminating the rig, the Gulf stretched black and empty, merging with the night sky at the horizon. The water looked solid from this height, like you could walk across it to the mainland 100 miles away. Martinez, Tony's voice cut through my thoughts. His hand gripped my shoulder, fingers digging in. Look. He pointed toward the ocean, northeast of our position. I squinted against the darkness. At first I saw nothing but black waves. Then I spotted her. A woman stood in the water, visible just beyond the reach of our floodlights, waist deep in the Gulf, perfectly still despite the current. Her skin glowed pale against the darkness, not reflecting light but generating it. A soft luminescence like phosphorescent algae. What the hell? I whispered. Don't move, Tony said. His voice dropped lower. Don't call out. I hadn't realized I had half risen from my chair until he said it. Something about her pulled at me, an instinctive urge to respond, to help. Who stands in ocean water at night, 100 miles from shore? What's she doing? I asked. Watching. Waiting. Tony's gaze remained fixed on the figure. Rule 2. Stay away from water after 11. The rule. Right. The laminated card pressed against my leg in my pocket. I'd already broken rules 1 and 3. I wasn't eager to complete the set. The woman remained motionless. Her hair hung long and dark, plastered against her skull and shoulders. From this distance, I couldn't make out her features clearly, but I felt her eyes on me. Not on the rig, on me specifically, tracking my movements through the control room window. Is she... I couldn't find the right word. Human? Alive? Real? Sea people, Tony said, his voice flat. They come most nights, watch us, look for weakness. The woman tilted her head, the movement too smooth, like a bird of prey considering its options. Despite the 100 feet separating us, I felt exposed, examined. How was she standing still in those currents? I asked. The Gulf at night generated swells that would challenge even strong swimmers. They don't follow the same rules we do. Tony checked his watch. 11:43. She'll stay another 10 minutes or so. We sat in silence, watching her watch us. Minutes crawled by. She never moved, never adjusted her position against the waves that should have buffeted her body. The pale glow of her skin seemed to intensify, creating a halo effect in the water around her. At 11:54, she sank beneath the surface, not diving or swimming down, sinking straight down like an elevator descending, her gaze locked on us until the black water closed over her head. No splash, no ripple marked her departure. Jesus, I breathed. Tony released his grip on my shoulder. I hadn't realized he'd kept his hand there the entire time. "They're getting bolder," he said, turning back to the console. "Used to stay farther out." I remained at the window, scanning the water's surface for any sign of her return. The Gulf showed only regular wave patterns now, as if she'd never been there. "What do they want?" I asked. Tony made another notation in the log, his handwriting tight and precise. "Same thing most predators want. Food." "Us?" He nodded once, not looking up. "Had a guy 2 years ago. Mitchell. Good worker. But he got curious after seeing one of them. Went down to the lower platform after midnight. We found his boots the next morning. Just his boots, sitting on the edge where the ladder meets the water." I swallowed hard, imagining boots left behind like emptied cocoons. "How many of them are out there?" "More than we've counted." Tony clicked his pen closed. "The woman's a scout. She reports back." "Reports what?" "How many of us are watching? Who seems interested?" His eyes met mine. "Who might follow a light into the water?" We returned to our duties. The routine helped settle my nerves, checking gauges, recording numbers, monitoring the drilling operation below. By 1:15, I'd almost convinced myself the woman had been a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. Then I saw the red light. It pulsed in the distance, maybe half a mile out. Rhythmic flashes. 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick. The international distress pattern. "Tony," I called, already moving toward the radio. "We've got a vessel in trouble." Tony looked up, then followed my gaze to the window. His face hardened. "That's not a vessel," he said. I reached for the radio anyway. Someone needed help out there. "We need to alert the Coast Guard. Get the spotlight on it." "Martinez." Tony's voice cut sharp. "Rule 4. Report red lights immediately." The 4th rule. I'd forgotten it completely in the moment. The laminated card remained in my pocket, but now I remembered. Report red lights on the water immediately. "I'm reporting it now," I said, gesturing at the radio. "Not to the Coast Guard. To Harrison." Tony grabbed the internal phone, punched 3 numbers. "John, it's Campbell. We've got lights, northeast quadrant." He hung up without waiting for a response. The red light continued its rhythmic pattern. 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick. A pattern designed by humans to signal distress, to trigger rescue instinct. My hand itched to grab the radio, to call for help. What if we were wrong? What if someone really was out there, dying while we stared? I moved toward the exterior door. "I'll get a better look from the platform." "Martinez, don't..." I was already through the door before Tony finished. The metal walkway vibrated under my boots as I jogged toward the northeast corner of the rig. The night air hit cold against my face after the climate-controlled interior. Salt spray misted upward from where waves struck the platform legs below. The red light pulsed brighter now, closer. No, not closer. Larger. What had seemed like a handheld flare or small boat light now resembled a powerful beacon. It illuminated nothing around it, just hung in the darkness, pulsing its distress call. I reached the railing and leaned over, straining to see a vessel, debris, anything that might explain the light. Nothing but black water surrounded the red glow. My hand found the emergency ladder release lever. If someone was in the water, they'd need immediate rescue. Hypothermia sets in fast, even in Gulf waters. My fingers closed around the lever. One pull would drop the ladder to water level. Standard rescue protocol. I'd done the drills dozens of times. A hand clamped onto my wrist like an iron manacle. "Let go of the lever." John Harrison's voice, low and commanding. I turned. John stood behind me, fully dressed despite the hour. His eyes reflected the red pulses from the water. "Someone's out there," I said, gesturing toward the light. "Nothing human." John maintained his grip on my wrist, stepped back from the railing. I hesitated. The red light pulsed, hypnotic. 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick, a promise of purpose. Save someone, be a hero, make a difference. "Now, Martinez." John's voice hardened. I stepped back. John released my wrist and positioned himself between me and the railing. "The light is bait," he said, watching my face. "They're fishing." "The sea people?" He nodded once. "The woman you saw earlier was scouting, counting targets, assessing vulnerability. Now they're casting their line." I looked past him to where the light pulsed. That's not possible. How would they know about distress signals, SOS patterns? They learn. John's expression remained grim in the artificial light. They watch us, study us, figure out what makes us respond. The red light intensified, its pulses quickening. No longer the regulated distress pattern, now it strobed frantically, like a scream made visible. "We've lost 4 men to those lights," John said. "Good men who went down that ladder thinking they were saving someone." The light suddenly extinguished. Complete darkness replaced the frantic red pulses. "They'll try again another night," John said, turning away from the railing. "They're patient." I followed him back toward the control room, my heart rate gradually slowing. On the walkway, I stopped to look back at the now empty water. "If the light is a lure," I asked, "what happens when someone takes the bait?" John paused but didn't turn around. "Nobody knows for sure. We never found enough of them to tell." Inside the control room, Tony looked up from the monitoring station. Relief crossed his face when he saw us both return. "Thanks for the call," John said to him. Then to me, "You would have been in the water before I arrived if Campbell hadn't alerted me." The realization settled cold in my stomach. I would have followed procedure, dropped the ladder, perhaps even descended to assist what I thought was a person in distress, and I would have vanished, leaving nothing but my boots on the platform edge. "4 rules," John said. "They exist for a reason, every single one written in blood." He left us to finish our shift. Tony returned to the monitoring stations without comment. I took my seat beside him, conscious of the red numbers on the digital clock. 2:07. Nearly 6 hours remained until sunrise. Outside the windows, the Gulf stretched dark and patient. I couldn't see the woman in the water anymore, but I felt her presence, waiting, watching for weakness, for the next rule I might break. I took the laminated card from my pocket and placed it on the console in front of me. 4 simple rules. The difference between life and death on this rig. I'd witnessed the consequences of breaking 3 of them now. The only mercy was that I'd survived the lessons. Morning light filtered through salt-crusted windows, casting uneven patterns across the mess hall tables. Steam rose from my coffee mug, black and bitter the way rig coffee always tasted. My bandaged forearm throbbed beneath my shirt sleeve, a steady reminder of what waited on the 3rd floor. John sat across from me, working through a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. He'd barely spoken since sitting down 5 minutes earlier. The mess hall hummed with the sounds of forks against plates and low conversations. Nothing about it seemed unusual, just offshore workers starting their day. "How long has it been like this?" I asked, keeping my voice low. John finished chewing before answering. 11 years, give or take a few months. He set his fork down with precision. Started with the old man. A night supervisor spotted him by the east storage containers. Thought he was a stowaway who'd snuck aboard with supplies. What happened to the supervisor? Found his hard hat on the walkway. Nothing else. John's face remained neutral, like he was discussing a routine equipment failure. 3 more disappeared before we figured out the pattern. Don't acknowledge him. Don't speak to him. You get to live. I glanced around the mess hall. Workers talked and ate. some laughing at a joke I couldn't hear, all of them living with monsters just outside the lighted areas. And the bathroom ghost? I touched my bandaged arm. Came next. Ellis worked here 2 years. Good man, kept to himself. John sipped his coffee. Started having nightmares, seeing things. We figured it was just isolation sickness. Happens sometimes on long rotations. Then he locked himself in that bathroom. And now he's stuck there. John nodded. Territorial. Won't or can't leave. We tried sealing it off, welding the door shut. Next morning, welds were broken, door wide open. Outside the windows, sunlight glinted off metal walkways and equipment. Everything looked normal, ordinary. The same industrial landscape I'd worked in for 9 years. The sea people came last. John continued. First sighting was 8 years ago. One of our engineers reported seeing a woman standing in the water watching the rig. We thought he was sleep-deprived, hallucinating. He pushed his empty plate aside. 2 nights later, he went missing. Security cameras showed him climbing down the emergency ladder at 2 in the morning. Never came back up. I remembered the pale woman in the water, her unnaturally still posture despite the currents. How many have you lost? 17 confirmed, maybe more from before we started tracking. John's eyes met mine. 4 to the old man, 3 to Ellis, 10 to the water. Jesus. The number landed heavy in my stomach. Why not evacuate? Shut down the rig? Company tried once. Brought in a new crew who didn't know anything. Didn't tell them about the rules. John rubbed his thumb against a scratch in the table's surface. Lost 6 men in 3 days. Decided it was more cost-effective to keep the rig running with informed personnel. And the government? Coast Guard? Official records show standard industrial accidents, equipment failures, falls. He lowered his voice further. There's a different incident report template for supernatural losses. Gets filed directly to corporate security. My coffee had gone cold. I pushed it away, suddenly not thirsty. I can arrange a transfer, John said. Most new people request one after their first encounter. No black marks on your record. Clean exit. I considered it. My last assignment had been comfortable. A newer rig with good equipment and an experienced crew. The biggest dangers had been equipment failures, weather, and human error. Normal, predictable hazards I'd trained for. How fast can you process the paperwork? I asked. Chopper can have you on shore by tomorrow afternoon. New assignment within the week. John pulled a folded form from his shirt pocket. Already started the process. Just needs your signature. He slid the paper across the table. Transfer request, my name already typed in the appropriate field. All I needed to do was sign, and I'd be gone. Away from the old man's black eyes, Ellis's razor nails, the pale woman in the water. Through the windows, I watched the day crew moving across walkways. They traveled in pairs, stayed in lit areas, kept to the center of platforms. Not afraid exactly, just careful, disciplined. They'd adapted to their environment like any good workers would. I rolled my shoulder, feeling the pull of bandaged skin. The scratches from Ellis, they're not infected? Clean wounds, nothing supernatural in them. John tapped the transfer form. But that's luck. Next time might be different. I watched a pair of workers checking valves, moving with practiced efficiency. There was something almost reassuring in their routine. They knew the threats. They had rules to follow. A realization settled into my bones. The danger here was known, mapped, contained by procedures. On another rig, I'd face nameless risks. New equipment I hadn't trained on, crews with different safety cultures, supervisors with unknown standards. Here, I understood the rules. The rules work? I asked. If you follow them, you survive? John nodded. 9 years without losing anyone who stuck to the protocol. I pushed the transfer form back toward him. I'll stay. His eyebrows lifted slightly. the most surprise I'd seen him show. "You sure about that, Martinez? Most people can't wait to leave once they've seen what's out there." "I've worked 17 rigs in 9 years," I said. "Everyone had different safety protocols, different equipment, different risks. At least here, I know exactly what to avoid." John studied my face, then refolded the form and returned it to his pocket. "Your choice. But remember, you've already broken 2 rules. The old man's watching you specifically now. And the 3rd rule." I touched my bandaged arm. "Ellis is confined. Avoid the 3rd floor. You avoid him." John stood, gathering his tray. "The sea people are your biggest concern. They're learning, adapting, getting closer to the platform each week." I nodded, accepting this new reality. "I'll stick to the buddy system after dark." "Smart." John paused before leaving. "You sleep light, Martinez?" "Usually." "Good." He set his tray on the cleaning rack. "You'll need to." After John left, I sat alone, watching sunlight dance across the Gulf's surface. From this height, in daylight, the water looked almost normal, just blue-green waves stretching to the horizon. Hard to imagine pale figures standing in it, watching, waiting. I pulled the laminated card from my pocket and read the 4 rules again, simple guidelines that meant the difference between life and death. My fingers traced the lamination's smooth edges. I remembered my first night, dismissing these as superstition. Now they were my lifeline. A cook emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He glanced at my bandaged arm showing beneath my rolled-up sleeve. "Ellis got you?" he asked. I nodded. "Welcome to the club." He showed 3 thin scars on his forearm. "Learned my lesson 2 years ago. Haven't been above the 2nd floor since." He moved on, continuing his work. Just another day on the rig. I pocketed the card and stood. My shift wouldn't start for another 10 hours. Plenty of time to rest, to prepare, to adapt to my new reality. One where monsters existed but followed rules you could memorize on a single card. As I walked back to my quarters, I scanned walkways from habit, checking dark corners and shadowed areas. Not out of fear, but procedural caution. The same way I'd check pressure gauges or inspect equipment. This was home now. A metal island with its own ecosystem of terrors and protocols. But I understood the terms, the boundaries, the rules of survival. I'd stay. I'd follow the rules. And maybe like the veterans, I'd live long enough to earn my own stories.